sunshine, a mild breeze in the pines. It was a vision of ruin, of decay, of utter emptiness, and it was obvious in the simplest, most recognizable structures. Motels, gas stations, restaurants, stores, even a movie theater, all of them abandoned to rot. Some of them so thoroughly decayed that all that was left of them was the great cement slab of the foundation, stained with oil or paint, littered with the splinters of the collapsed building, its rusted sign leaning. Some were brick-faced, others made of cinder blocks, but none of them was well made, and so the impression I had was of devastation, as though a recent war had ravaged the place and destroyed the buildings and killed all the people. Here was the corpse of a motel, the Elite, the sign still legible, broken buildings and a wilderness of weeds. And farther down the road, the Sands and the Presidential Inn, collapsed, empty. And the restaurant's empty too, what unmistakably the curved roof and distinctive cupola of Howard Johnson's restaurant. Another just a wreck, but with a gigantic sign, its peeling paint promising lobster. And another fractured place with a cracked swimming pool and broken windows, its rusted sign, Crescent Motel, the more pathetic for being misspelled. Most of the shops were closed, the only functioning ones owned by recent Indian immigrants. The Art Deco single-screen movie house, once the Carolina Theater, was boarded up. The wide main street was littered, the side streets lined by shacks and abandoned houses, looking haunted. I'd never seen anything quite like it. The ghost town on the ghost highway. I was glad I had come.
That is such an interesting last sentence there. I mean, a regular traveller would think, I feel depressed by this place, or it makes me feel but is it because you're a writer that you think, a wonderful place to describe, or what is it?
Absolutely, Harry. I was thinking, I've never seen anything like this before. I was glad I had come. I'm a witness. A traveller is an eyewitness. And if you go, say that's Aladdin, if you travel
possible.
and hoping that something will come of it.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, and on that we have to leave it. Next month, a totally different America, an exclusive boarding school in the northeastern state of Massachusetts, the setting for a novel called Prep by best-selling author Curtis Sittenfeld. Rated by a 14-year-old girl who's got into the school on a scholarship, Prep is both a sharp-eyed insight into one particular snobbish institution and a universal story of class, sex, race, and teenage angst. If you'd like to ask Curtis a question about it, nothing easier. Just email us or tweet us at BBCWBC. All relevant details on our website, where you can also download more than 200 World Book Club podcasts, interviews with the world's best-loved authors from Isabel Allende to Derek Walcott, and if travel writing is something you particularly love, Bill Bryson. For now, from me, Harriet Gilbert, and producer Karen Hunt, thank you to our sound engineer Duncan Allen, to Jill Hugging, Rick Oscar, and Hannah O'Reilly for marshalling your questions, to all you members of BBC World Book Club, wherever you are, and especially massive thank you to this month's guest, Paul Theroux.
people are watching very carefully now is that it has the potential to spiral into a wider conflict. Rockets being fired from Gaza overnight, and also the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Militant groups in Gaza say several sites have been targeted by Israeli strikes since the clashes at Al-Aqsa.
Japan says it will provide non-lethal military aid to what it calls friendly nations. The announcement formalises a process that's already begun. Tokyo has not said which countries will receive help, but these could include the Philippines and Malaysia. President Macron says China could play a major role in ending the war in Ukraine because of its close links with Russia. The French leader spoke shortly after arriving in Beijing for a 3-day visit. China has presented itself as a possible mediator in the conflict. This might
happened that we've all been following for the last sort of 24 hours, the history of seeing a former president being charged with a crime. But once he kind of left the city and was back in his adopted home of Palm Beach, Florida, then you got to the kind of more familiar Donald Trump, the one who was airing his grievances, who was kind of expressing more of that kind of anger that we've seen from him, that we're more used to, taking fire at people he feels are his enemies. And so in that sense, it was on more familiar territory. It felt like a political speech at times. And I think it goes to the heart of the fact that you can't separate the legal case here from the political.
And the judge didn't issue a gag order despite the personal attacks that Donald Trump has made on the judge's family and the prosecutor's family, but did ask both sides to be mindful of their language and rhetoric. And there are concerns about perhaps rhetoric that could inflame passions given how much Donald Trump polarizes opinion in America.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Like, if you look at what's happened to the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, since the indictment dropped, he's under heavy security. He's had threats to himself and his family. There was an envelope of white powder sent to him. So it just shows kind of the risks that exist. And I think that is a concern. And so, people have been watching this speech from Donald Trump in which he didn't address the charges against him directly, but he did attack the district attorney, he did attack the judge, he did attack their family members. And so some are seeing this as, is he risking or trying to kind of egg the judge on to impose a gag order? But it has to be a pretty high bar. Again, it goes to this idea that, it's impossible to separate the legal from the political, because when you're considering a gag order, in this particular instance, you're talking about someone who, at the same time that this legal proceeding will be playing out, will also be running for office. And so therefore you're removing his First Amendment rights if you try and stop him from being able to speak out. So it's a very difficult balance that the judge is kind of trying to weigh here.
Michelle Fleury. Now, let's turn to Jerusalem. That is the sound of clashes at the Al-Aqsa mosque compound, a site that is holy to both Jews and Muslims. According to Israeli police, stones were thrown and fireworks set off towards them after they arrested and removed hundreds of angry worshippers who barricaded themselves inside the mosque. Femi Abbas is one of them.
In the yard to the eastern part of the compound, the police were firing tear gas and stun grenades. It was a scene that I can't describe. Then the police stormed in and started beating everyone, and they detained people, putting young people on their fronts with their faces to the ground. They also beat them while in detention.
The scene is not unfamiliar in this contested compound. Clashes here in 2021 set off a 10-day Israeli war with Gaza. This time round, the worshippers apparently responded to a call from Hamas, the Islamist militant group that controls Gaza, to protect the site after reports that some right-wing Jews were planning to sacrifice a Passover goat there. Well, our correspondent in Jerusalem, Lucy Williamson, told us more about the latest violence.
The Israeli police say they went into the mosque in the early hours of this morning to clear it after a group of Palestinians had barricaded themselves inside. And you heard some of the sound effects there. I mean, we've seen video footage of fireworks exploding towards the Israeli police officers. Also other footage we've seen of the police officers beating people inside the mosque with batons, even with their weapons, arresting 350 up to 500 of them, and some light injuries as well. About 14 Palestinians lightly injured in that. We've seen these sorts of scenes in Al-Aqsa Mosque. The risk is that it sparks something wider here, and we've already seen rockets overnight fired from Gaza towards Israel. No injuries reported there. Israeli Air Force have also responded by carrying out airstrikes against Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. Things are quieting down here at the moment, but we are at the beginning of a week where the Jewish holiday of Passover coincides with the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, and so security forces are very aware of the risk of any conflagration